Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming this evening. We really appreciate it. I'm Michelle, this is Jane and this is Harley. They're all going to be speaking tonight as well. Just a bit of housekeeping. The toilet is down the corridor. It's quite a long way, but feel free to pop out and get a drink, something to eat while we go through. We'll go close to the full hour. Hopefully there'll be some times for questions before 6:30, but we will stay here at least until about 10 to 7 or so if you want to come and chat or ask any questions as well. Great. Anything else, Jane?
No, I think you've covered it all.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to do an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the Palawa Pakana of Lutruwita, the traditional owners of the land on which we live and work. We pay respects to elders past and present as the knowledge holders and sharers. We honour their strong culture and knowledges as vital to the self-determination, well-being and resilience of their communities. We stand for a future that profoundly respects and acknowledges Aboriginal perspectives, culture, language and history. So now we've got a special speaker who was not on the program, Harley, who's going to tell us a little bit about his, I guess, journey with Parkinson's and how he's made a difference for the first 15 minutes or so. Thank you, Harley.
Thank you, Michelle. I can tell you it's been an absolute pleasure for me to get to know Jane and Michele and to work with them over the last 3 to 4 years. And you'll hear a little bit about that story now. My name's Harley Stanton. I was asked to introduce this important session. If it was an AA meeting, I'd say, I'm Harley and I'm addicted to Parkinson's. Just ask my wife. That's how we used to spray the apple trees on our large orchard in Allen's Rivulet, south of Hobart. Dale Elphinston told me he used to visit there as a caterpillar agent to visit our property because we also moved into earth moving. You can see how extensive the PPE equipment is. And we used to use a big bean speed air sprayer that would spray the machines, the air out all over the property and spray the apple trees. And we produced beautiful apple trees, apples to send off to England, packed in cellophane paper, in greased cellophane paper to feed people like Jane who are going to come and live in Tasmania later. So this is an amazing situation. I used to go with the family truck which sold apples in Queenstown. I took these pictures in about 1960. That was Queenstown in 1960. With 99 bends on the last mile into Queenstown. And that's sulphur sprays and so forth used to do. A few weeks ago, I mentioned this to somebody and they said, I think I can get hold of a box for you. This is the box Bluestone used to come in, 56 pounds, copper sulphate. We'd mix it up and spray it on the apple trees to kill some of the insects or the fungal. Beautiful little mortised pine box. That's exactly the spray that used to come. I now look back on that and say, that's one of the reasons why I've got Parkinson's. I'll show you the next slide, which gives you a little bit more. Yeah, we used to have a big, Dad went to Melbourne, bought some old airplane wheels from the World War II and put them on trailers and we'd bring the apples in like this. Had a very big property. We used to produce about 60 or 70,000 bushels each year. And there's little Harley with the raspberry bushes in the back and my 5 brothers there with me on the picture on the right. And I'm the smallest one because I was the youngest. And one of my other brothers developed Parkinson's and died with Parkinson's as well. So 2 out of the 6 developed Parkinson's. And my major work over life has been to work with the World Health Organization to implement the global treaty to reduce tobacco use. But I feel now that the work that I'm doing in Parkinson's is just as important as the work I did to reduce tobacco use around the world in 2003. So that's it. There's the 6 neurological conditions in Australia. For MND, there's 3,000 people. For multiple sclerosis, there's 30,000. For Parkinson's, there's at least 200,000 people We know there's 190,000 people on Matapar. That's the levodopa medication that most people use. Then there's epilepsy at about 250, 300,000, dementia at about 400,000, and stroke at about 440, 450,000. So Parkinson's has been one of the very neglected areas in Australian health conditions. In 2021, in September, I joined the Island Project. Don't know who's heard of the Island Project? Thank you, that's good, that's really encouraging. The Island Project's one of the largest dementia projects in the world, and it's right here in Tasmania. They've got about 14,000 people in charge, enrolled in it, and Jane is one of the leaders of the Island Project, and it's a very, very important project. I went to a program over here in Mowbray, and Andy Williams, who's a sports associate professor there, I said to him after I went to do all the testing with fingers and facial and all the rest of it, I said, so you're doing a lot about dementia. What are you doing about Parkinson's? He said, not much, but go and see Jane Alty if you want to. That was September 2021. In November 2021, we held the first meeting with 7 people. There's myself, there's Chris, he's a CNC nurse. There's Ruth Musgrove, Jane Alty, Tracy Dixon, and Catherine Hamilton, and Dr. Frank Nicholson took the picture. So that's the situation there at fledgling meeting. And as we were coming away, Frank said, well, that's a fledgling meeting. I said, I don't want it to be fledgling. I want it to have wings for Parkinson's. So we built momentum over the period. Thank you, Davina, for being here. Davina Farmer is here in this group. She's been a strong supporter of over the last few years. We formed a group to say wings for Parkinson's, because I don't want it to be just fight, Avengers, PD warriors and so forth. They're all good names. But I want Parkinson's people to own their Parkinson's. I want people to bring Parkinson's out of the closet. It's been too long hidden behind the screens. So we've got to change that. And that's what I'm trying to do with advocacy, research, knowledge, care and prevention. So we've now got about 30 people in this group, and it's really grown to be something that's had significance, as you'll see before we go through. In February 2024, we held a symposium in Hobart. I think some of you were there. Who attended the symposium in Hobart? Okay, that's about 12, 15 people. Wonderful. And that was a really sort of an innovative move for us. And at that time, we invited down Professor Glenda Halliday. She's one of the global leads in Parkinson's research, and she gave a great presentation. And anyway, at that point, we formed the Tasmanian Parkinson's Project. Jane and Michele were particularly influential in that. And the Parkinson's Project has grown to be something very, very significant in Australia. And I think it's going to go on and become, we aim to get 5,000 people. And I looked this afternoon and there were 3,855. So it's grown from around Australia. It's not just Tasmania. And there's about a third of the people have Parkinson's, about a third are carers, about a third don't have Parkinson's. What's the advantage of that? You're able to do research across sector to find out what the differences are between the people and what's actually happening. So this is a wonderful, wonderful project right here from Tasmania, Tasmanian Parkinson's Project. And then another feature in 2024, we had an award grant given to us by these two men, second from the left, on my left anyway, Rich Ballinson to my right, and to Jane's left is Michael Katz. These are two philanthropists from Sydney. One of them sold his business to Elon Musk. The other one's been in commercial banking for many years. They've set up what's called the Parkinson's Research Foundation in Australia. They gave us $250,000 to develop a MOOC. What's a MOOC? Massive open online course. It's not a cow. It's a massive open online course. And the lady second from the across from Michele Emily Handley. In 6 months, she worked with all of us. Jane did about 80 interviews, and the MOOC course has been so successful. It was developed in 6 months. It launched on February 5 in 2025, and in the space of 12 weeks, we had 25,000 people from 160 countries enrolled in the MOOC, 37% completion, and the MOOC actually reached to be number 4 on Class Central globally for health MOOCs, and that out of 11,000 MOOCs. This was just so successful, and they closed it down for a time, and it's now just been reopened, and it's starting to gain momentum again. So it really is a great course. If you want to know more about Parkinson's and you want to do it online, take the MOOC. It's five modules dealing with the various areas of Parkinson's, and you can learn a great deal about the MOOC. Just don't always look at the gold guy in the picture. Now, one of the really nice things, the two people that are doing the research presentations here tonight are really outstanding people. I can tell you, since I started to take up this interest in 2019, I was diagnosed by my GP through loss of facial expression. So if I don't smile at you as much as I would, it's because I haven't concentrated, because I have to concentrate to really smile now. And as a result of that, we need much more research in the area. And one of the things that Michele's done, she's done 200 major papers, published research papers. Jane has done probably more than that, but I don't know, I'm not going to ask her. But these are two of the outstanding researchers, not only in Tasmania, but Australia, and I believe in the world. And you're going to hear from them tonight. Michele recently applied for a grant, the National Health and Medical Research Council, to implement ParkinsonNet. It's a program that was developed in the Netherlands by Bas Bloem, one of the top researchers in the world. And he implemented this back in 2004, and it's had a real impact in the Netherlands. Parkinson's is not increasing in the Netherlands and in England because they've banned the sprays in England that are very, very toxic, and they banned them in the Netherlands. In fact, they monitor all spraying in the Netherlands so that if you're any spraying going around in your backyard, you know exactly what's happening and what's the result of it. And it's something we've got to come to in Australia. We've still got paraquat, 28 times more toxic than glyphosate, Roundup. And it's increasing in use in Australia. When you go past these paddocks and you see them all brown, that's paraquat that's been used to kill everything and then leaches into the soil and comes back in our food. We've got to do something about it. In February, we've been there. So Michele got a grant of 2.8 million, and she's going to implement this program in Tasmania and in the Barwon area. So in July 2023, I went on television, ABC television. I said, we need a national plan. And we do. We need a national plan. Through the Wings for Parkinson's Intelligence, we formed a group called the National Parkinson's Alliance, because Parkinson's in Australia was very fragmented at that stage. And so we formed the National Parkinson's Alliance in 2023. We applied for some funding to the federal government in 2024, and we got 400,000 for 2 years to develop a National Parkinson's Action Plan. I didn't bring it along tonight, but we're almost going to hand the plan to the government at the end of November, and that'll be something that they hope to take up on early in 2026, and we hope to plan to release that in March 2026 at Parliament House in Canberra. A few weeks ago, Jane was in Hawaii, and she met Michael O'Kearn. Michael O'Kearn, Ray Dorsey and Bas Bloem are three of the top people in the world in research in Parkinson's. He said recently, this is a disease that not only affects movement, but it affects mood and other causes, 40 motor and non-motor symptoms, and particularly the non-motor symptoms. You normally think of people with shakers, but the non-motor symptoms can be a bit of sialorrhea, dribbling around the mouth. It can be loss of facial expression, loss of smell, constipation, whole range of up to 40 symptoms. The most complex medical condition that exists, according to Michael O'Kearn. And so he said, we have to do something about it. And they launched this book recently called The Parkinson's Plan. In November 2023, the National Parkinson's Alliance went to the Senate in Canberra We met with Senator Billick, who recently retired. Senator Richard Dowling in Hobart has taken her place. He's very supportive of us as well. And along with Senator Askew, local Senator Wendy Askew, Senator Billick and Senator Askew were the co-chairs of the Parliamentary Friends of Parkinson's. They supported our plan to actually submit to government. And so we've now got that. We had a summit in March 2026 at Parliament House, and most of the state organisations were on board at that stage. Now we've come to a point where we actually produced, I'm sorry you can't see the slide clearly, we've produced about 110-page literature review. We had 5,000 enrolled people from across Australia joined our survey with KPMG, who we appointed as the support for development of the plan. We've had about 717 people in person-to-person interviews, and the report comes to us, the summary report is about 70 pages long, and we'll be submitting this to government in just a couple of weeks' time. So this is a really major step forward for the government, and we hope to get some action to take place as a result. It says 2026 there, but it means 2025. Fortunately, I'm delighted to say we now have all the state-based agencies, New South Wales, Victoria, Fight Parkinson's, Neuro, which is Neurological Research Australia, Shake It Up Foundation, which was formed by Clyde Campbell some years ago. We have the Hospital Research Foundation in South Australia, and they look after Northern Territory and ACT. Queensland University of Technology, where Richard Gordon is, he's one of the real researchers in the world and Australia in relation to gut microbiome and Parkinson's, because we're not sure whether it starts in the brain or goes to the gut, starts in the gut and goes to the brain. We think it might be about 50% each. And then the University of Tasmania, Jane and Michele, and the Wings for Parkinson's, Queensland, Western Australia, Tasmania, Weehai. Walter and Eliza Hall Institute in Melbourne. Very, very soon. A couple of years ago, when I was doing a bit of this advocacy, my wife said to me one day, "You're a real gate rattler, aren't you?" I said, "It's easy to be a gate rattler when you've got Parkinson's. All you've got to do is hold the gate." Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you'll go on and realise that this is a very important area of Australian healthcare and we need to support it. Thank you.
Before Harley sits down, we would just like to give a small gift to Harley, because as you've heard, he's done some absolutely phenomenal work. And I think Judith, his wife, was telling me, you know, when he gets an idea in his head, he will not let it go. And I think the drive and the passion that Harley's shown, and this is not just in Tasmania, this is now on a global basis. This artist is in Canada who's doing personalised art just for Harley, which I think sums it up really. But more than that, I would also like to thank Harley for many years of friendship and mentorship, because he means a great deal to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, Harley, present, please.
Wow.
This is by a local artist, Andy Phipps, who's a photographer, and he's also a lab scientist at the university. So another multiple talented person, a bit like yourself, Harley.
Thank you very, very much. I would like, before I sit down today, I'd like to acknowledge a person who helped us start the Tasmanian Parkinson's project several years ago. He won't want to be acknowledged, but I know he's here tonight, and I wanted to thank him particularly for his gift that gave us a start with the funding that I gave to the university at the start of the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's really hard to follow Harley. When Harley talks first, I hate being second because he's such an engaging speaker. So I'll probably keep my talk quite short and sweet, but give you a little bit of an overview of some of the other work that we've been doing. So as you can probably hear, I'm not a Tasmanian, but I'm very grateful to Tasmania for allowing me to make it my home for the last 7 years or so. I'm from the north of England, originally from Lancashire, and for those sports fans, you'll recognise this as Headingley Stadium. Sort of, if you're cricket fans, that's actually Yorkshire, but I lived there for 15 years. I did work in Melbourne about 17 years ago. I did a movement disorders fellowship, but otherwise I largely worked in the UK as a medical doctor, as a neurologist, and as I say, moved over here about 7 years ago. So that's a little bit of background on me. You probably know that to diagnose Parkinson's, as doctors, we look for 3 things. And the way I sort of teach medical students is that there are 3 S's. So we look for slowness of movement, which the medical term is bradykinesia. We look for the shakes or a tremor, and we look for muscle stiffness. Those are the 3 S's. You don't have to have all 3. Actually, the slowness of movement is the key feature, and then we look for at least one of the others. And you might think, well, that sounds really easy. I could be a neurologist. I could diagnose that. And you're probably right in some cases, actually. Sometimes the diagnosis is quite straightforward. Harley mentioned a loss of facial expression. There's other signs that we can look for. And that's probably a little bit of a slowness of facial expression. So that bradykinesia isn't just in the limbs. It can be in other body parts. But the key question is how slow is too slow? Because I suspect if I went around the room and said, which of these is Parkinson's, or are any of them Parkinson's? Are people just a bit slow because they've got a bit of arthritis, or it's just them? Or is this potentially the first signs of Parkinson's? And I can guarantee, and I can see Matt Lee Archer, our local neurologist here, if I had 100 neurologists, we'd probably all say something a bit different too, and we're trained in this. And the point is that as humans, we have variability in what we see. And because we're basing our diagnosis on this, we do sometimes get it wrong. And I'm very open with people and say, look, sometimes I'm not sure. I need to see you again in 6 months. But because of the fact that we are basing our diagnosis on human perception, there's been an increasing interest of, could we supplement that? We don't want to do away with doctors. We don't want to replace doctors with machines, but could we use this sort of technology? And I'll just show you. So this is a video just taken through one of these, which nearly every doctor has in the pocket, and I'm sure most people do here. And then afterwards, the computer can label the different parts of the hand and give us a graph like that. So suddenly now we've gone from a subjective, is it a bit slow? We're not sure, to a precise measure of frequency, amplitude, speed, and rhythm. And I think you can see that would be really handy. If you could see somebody, you still take the history, you still treat the person in front of you as a person, but you could give a number to it too. And that would be super handy, that when we treat people, we can then say, oh, that has improved, or no, it hasn't. So these are new technologies that are coming in. They're still a research phase, but I don't think they're far off entering the clinic. Just for the purpose of time, I'll skip through, but this is another video just taken with a mobile phone, and the computer has begun to recognize what is the frequency of that tremor. And you can see the little accelerometer on the back of the hand is the gold standard, but they're quite expensive and most clinics wouldn't have those. So we're saying, how's about using something that's in our pocket? This is kind of interesting. Some people here with Parkinson's might recognize that when they're off or before they were diagnosed, they had an internal tremor. The guy on the left, he's saying, I've got an internal tremor. We can't see it. The computer's amplified that, and suddenly we can see what he's telling us. And all it's doing is amplifying movement of the pixels, basically. And this is just showing that a control movement looks different. So this is quite exciting because it means we might be able to diagnose sooner. But I think it's also really validating, so that when people say, I've got a tremor and us doctors can't see it, we can use the computer to try and sort of supplement our clinical acumen. This is just saying that now this can be done in real time. This is literally holding a mobile phone up as somebody moves their fingers. And I don't know if you can see, but there's little numbers that are flashing up, and that's the computer certainty in that movement. So it's been trained to recognize a closed movement or an open movement. And those of you with Parkinson's, remember that we like to do this a lot in clinic, don't we? We're getting people to tap and see whether they're improving and so on. And this is one where, by the computer recognizing that gesture, it can start to tell us, well, how many taps were there in a certain period and so on. And I often say this to the trainees, we're only human. We are not machines. And that's beautiful, because we don't want to be machines. We want to be doctors treating people. But we are very biased, and we see what we look for. And I think this is why we sometimes get the diagnosis wrong, or we sometimes see an improvement in a certain medication when there wasn't one. And I do think, just like most areas of medicine have moved to precision, that it's important we consider this in movement disorders as well. You've heard from Harley about the Island Project. This is James Vickers, who I think many of you will know. He set up this fantastic project, which is all about trying to prevent dementia. We have some of the highest dementia rates in Australia, here in Tasmania, due to a few different reasons. But what James said is, rather than waiting for the inevitable to happen, we now know that about half of dementias can be prevented or delayed by modifying risk factors. And those risk factors are things like high blood pressure, smoking, drinking too much, and so on. But this is a story of hope, because it means that if we modify those as a population, we can start to drive down dementia in Tasmania. We've got about 14,000 people that take part in the Island Project, and these were just some numbers of people that have done different parts of the project. I'll explain a couple of those now. So TAS test, or Tasmanian test, is a computerised test that we've developed at the university. And effectively what we're trying to do is look at all of those people in the Island Project and track their movement, their thinking, their cognition, and their speech over time. Because what's really interesting is that if you think about people that develop dementia, a lot of you will think, oh, they get memory problems. And you're absolutely right. But about 20 years before people develop memory problems, they actually develop slowed movement. So their walking becomes slower, their hand movements become slower, their speech changes a little bit. And what we're trying to do here is get a test that, rather than waiting for dementia to appear and start treating it then, we detect risk 10, 20 years earlier and start to focus some of that risk factor modification on that group. So it's an ambitious study. This is just showing one of the tests. It's super simple. People at home use a laptop for this one, and they're asked to tap the N and the M key as fast as they can for about 20 seconds, which sounds really simple. But if they hit the wrong key, they get a penalty. So you can see they lose 1 if they hit a B, lose 2 if they hit a V. And from that super simple test, we can then extract all of these movement features. So to the person doing it, they're like, oh, that was 20 seconds, that was really easy. But because we repeat it each year, we can start to see those that are declining. And those that are declining in things like speed and the rhythm, they seem to be at higher risk of developing dementia. So it's really about developing technology here in Tasmania that we can take to the world, because dementia is such a major problem. All of those tools, of course, are really relevant to Parkinson's too, because could we use those to detect that slowness that we've heard about, that bradykinesia? These are just a few publications, and this one was, we had 2,500 people do TAS test at home, which was phenomenal. People are just amazing to take part in this study. And then they filled in questionnaires to tell us what they think about it. And what was really lovely here is that we had some people that never use computers, and then we had others that are really confident with computers. We had people with quite low levels of education, people that had a PhD, and everybody in between. And we found that regardless of your education, regardless of your computer literacy, you can do these tests at home. And that's a real step forward, because in the past we've tended to say, oh, you've got to come into the centre, you've got to come into the research centre. And by having a home-based test, that suddenly gives us huge reach. And people prefer it. They don't want to necessarily come into the centre. They like to do things at home. Which is a nice segue into saying we were really fortunate that the university funded us for a brand new centre. The university gave us $500,000, not to me, that wasn't like nicely in my back pocket. This was to fund a brand new movement analysis lab. And here you can see some of the things that we can track. You can see some fancy cameras. There's like a mat on the floor that detects where your feet are. We've got fancy sensors. And really, this is about really trying to develop precision. So we recognise that when people use mobile phones or laptops at home, there's going to be a bit of imprecision, there's going to be a bit of movement and so on. But we're validating those tests against these gold standard tests. You can see here that we're tracking hand movements, and going back to Harley's comment on the facial expression, we're now getting tools that can actually look at facial expression. And we're really trying to train that all through a mobile phone. So I think this is next generation of proactively looking at risk to treat people early. So I'm going to just skip for the last 5 minutes or so round to another digital tool that you've heard a little bit about. So all of what I've talked about there is trying to improve detection, monitoring, improve people's treatment plans to ultimately improve their quality of life. And that can be used for Parkinson's, it can be used for dementia and lots of other neurological disorders. The Parkinson's MOOC, you now all know, is the massive open online course that was developed here in Tasmania. And I purposefully put this, the rowing team together because it's truly been a team effort. There's quite a few people in this room that contributed to the MOOC, and the MOOC just would not have been as good without those contributions. And many people have said to us, I really identified with that person. I wanted to know what happened to them or that other person. And I think by having such a variety of speakers, that's really made this not only very relevant to people across Australia, but very relevant to people across the world. So I think you know the answer to that now. Harley's already guessed what I had on my slide. I'll skip over that one. This is just to say, though, regarding MOOCs, they've been around a little while, actually, particularly related to understanding and preventing dementia. And this is something that the university has been developing had around for about 10 years. And we know through having these MOOCs that we get global reach. Not only that, but we also get all the email addresses for people around the world, which really allows us to draw people into other educational activities. And really, it just becomes a program that grows and grows. But here at the University of Tasmania, there's a worldwide reputation now that we do these well. I think you've heard a few of the stats. That's just saying that we've had these previous dementia MOOCs, one on multiple sclerosis, one on traumatic brain injury. You can log in and do all of these for free whenever you want to do them. And they've been very well designed so that they're really in the top 10 of the medical courses around the world. And they're really designed to be done by the average person. You don't have to have medical knowledge or specialist knowledge. You can see here there's been worldwide reach in terms of the number of people that have done these various MOOCs. And there across the bottom, about a third of people also say, we would like to take part in research. And that's really exciting because it means we start to get a cohort of people that we can take it a bit further so it doesn't become just an educational tool. We can also invite them to take part in different research studies. I put this here because I really was struck by the ripple effect of MOOCs when we were designing them, that we had our own ideas for our local colleagues and clinicians. And for me, I was thinking about patients that I see in clinic, but this has really rippled around the world. And I think just had huge impact. As you've heard, they normally take about a year to develop. We had to do ours in 6 months, which was quite a race. It was an intense 6 months. I wonder if this might just play with sound. Let's see. I'd just like to show you sort of, if you've not done the MOOC, the sort of, no? It's all right. I don't know if it'll play. Let's see.
Take hold of the diagnosis and live your life irrespective of the diagnosis. And don't let it be any restriction on what you can do or what you plan to do normally within reason. The second thing is, I would say, learn as much as you can about Parkinson's. A lot of people like to find out, why it is, why has this happened? And I certainly have sought to do that. I've read widely and I've continued to search for new information and share it with your friends and your family and your other people in the community, because we have to change this misunderstanding in relation to Parkinson's that exists within the community. And then the third thing is get involved in Parkinson's research, support, dynamic, and let's make a change in the world of which we've become a part.
So as you can see, that's just one video from the MOOC, but they're really professionally made, and I think they're really engaging. And it's not your average course. When we say course, it's not where you're sitting down and reading loads. A lot of it's done through videos, through animations, and through quizzes. And this is just showing the enormous array of people that have contributed to the MOOC. from particularly we wanted to focus on people with Parkinson's and their family members. And I think that's made it incredibly authentic and kept it very focused on what are the priorities of the community. I'm going to skip over this because I'm running towards the end of my time, but this is just an example on the left of what the MOOC looks like, that you get these little videos and then just really nice bite-sized pieces of information. And that's Michele and I pretending to be little presenters. And we had fun, didn't we, Michele? This was, it was something that we produced, but it was also a lot of fun. I'm going to skip over this. This is an animation where we explain about treatments with the analogy of a bath. So if you're interested, that's your little hook in. You've got to come and join the MOOC to find out what that one's about. You've seen that slide already. And just really coming to the end of my talk, this is to say it really works. We did a questionnaire with people before the MOOC and we did it afterwards. And then we split it into, are you a health professional? Do you have Parkinson's? And you can see that the blue or the turquoise circles are the amount of information that they had, or the amount of knowledge they had about Parkinson's before, and the red is how much afterwards. And you can see everybody shifted. And of course, people with Parkinson's knew the most. They are the experts, and that's why we put them right in the centre of this course. I have to say, I was a bit disappointed with the health professionals there. I would have expected more, but, maybe that's a good sign that those that were not specialists did it. We'll see. So I think last slide, we were really pleased to see what people wrote about this course. And of course, it's lovely to have 5 out of 5 stars and be rated 4th out of 11,000. We're not going to deny we're pleased with that. But what really touched me was when people said, this course helped me to not be so afraid of this condition, or this course has helped me to live well with it and realise there's things I can do to live a good life with Parkinson's. And I think that's more about changing attitudes and people's hearts, and that's really hard to do. So I was really pleased that we'd managed to do that. Okay, I'm going to end there. Those are some of the contributors to the MOOC that we very much say thank you to. And I particularly put Harley there as the biggest picture because he really has been the driving force for all of this work here in Tasmania. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm unlucky because I get to follow 2 fantastic speakers. So I'm Michele, I'm a physiotherapist. I worked for many years in neurological rehabilitation. I was diagnosed myself with Parkinson's almost 4 years ago, and I guess the silver lining of that has really been to work with these 2 wonderful people. So I'm going to talk to you about ParkinsonNet, which, as you know now, UTAS has this research grant to bring ParkinsonNet to Tasmania. It's been really held up as a model of care around the world. It's been rolled out now in Norway, Luxembourg, North America. It's about to be rolled out in Italy, Poland. It's really exciting that now it's actually going to hopefully come and be rolled out around Australia eventually, but Tasmania will be one of the pilot sites. So I'm going to really just try and set the scene of why we need ParkinsonNet. So Mary is 54. She's fictional. She lives in a rural town, could be anywhere really in Australia. She works at a local school. She loves gardening. And over the last couple of years, she's had low mood and anxiety, loss of facial expression, left-sided tremor, lack of arm swing and drags her foot. She didn't have a neurologist nearby, so she either travelled, could have been up to 200 kilometres to see a neurologist, and she was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and she was put on levodopa therapy. 8 weeks later, she came back and saw that same neurologist. Things had really improved. Her facial expression, rigidity, arm swing and walking had all improved. She was told to exercise, fantastic. She wasn't really an exercise person and she wasn't really sure what to do. The neurologist said she was looking good and would see her in 6 months' time. But Mary didn't actually say that she was still feeling really anxious. She was pretty tearful and she's not sleeping well. She didn't actually know that these were actually quite common symptoms of Parkinson's. And in fact, fatigue was impacting on her everyday activities and relationships. And she was thinking of giving up work and she wasn't going out as much to see her friends. And so her appointment was in 6 months' time. And so it's really important that she would get best practice care. And so what would be best practice care? So best practice care is care according to research, preferably really randomised control trials that might be put together into a meta-analysis to see whether an intervention works. And certainly exercise has got really good evidence behind it that it can slow the symptoms of Parkinson's. It's also about taking into consideration a person's values, so tailoring it to what's important to the person and making sure that they have enough knowledge so that they can take part in decision making. And if there's not enough evidence, experts often get together and have an expert opinion or consensus about what people should receive. And so really common in Parkinson's consensus statements and guidelines is that people with Parkinson's should have an expert multidisciplinary team from the time of diagnosis with regular follow-ups. So if we look at what patient values are, well, of course we all want a cure. But while we're waiting for a cure, what we really want to do is to be able to continue the things that are really important to us, whether that's leisure, photography, gardening, going to beautiful places. For Mary, that was gardening, staying at work, and doing everything that she possibly could to slow the progression of symptoms. She needed that knowledge about Parkinson's. We're all very familiar with the tremor, the slowness, the shuffly gait, but there's so many symptoms below the iceberg that you can't see with Parkinson's. And these are some beautiful pictures that have been drawn by a man living with Parkinson's who's also a doctor in the UK. That anxiety, sleep and fatigue that is affecting Mary. So really, the medications can be really wonderful and work really well, but they don't necessarily make an impact on everything and that grief that comes from that time of diagnosis. And so what's recommended is this multidisciplinary team, and I'm not sure, I guess hopefully you can see that. The person is at the centre, the doctor, the nurse, the GP, hopefully everyone with Parkinson's has one. But around the side are the physiotherapist, the speech pathologist, the occupational therapist, the exercise physiologist that can really help that person continue to do the things that they want to do and get them really set up with an exercise program to slow the progression of the condition. As I've said, exercise has really good evidence behind it, not just for slowing progression of symptoms, it can be beneficial for cognitive function, fatigue, mood. And physio can also help with movement strategies, so helping someone standing up out of a chair, moving in bed, and problems with freezing of gait. There's lots of strategies that physiotherapy has really good evidence for. Psychology, I think it's often a forgotten profession at the time of diagnosis. There's really good evidence for cognitive behavioural therapy, for mental health, and occupational therapy. There's great evidence for continuing, getting people to continue to do the activities they want to do. So for example, for Mary, they might teach her some strategies to manage fatigue. And believe it or not, there is something called sleep hygiene in terms of lots of strategies to help people sleep better. Mary may not need speech pathology right at the beginning, but I think having a baseline assessment of someone's volume for their voice can be really useful because things can progress really slowly and people may not notice. It's also really important that the health professionals have experience in Parkinson's. And so there's good evidence that if someone sees say a physiotherapist or an occupational therapist who's had training in Parkinson's, the outcomes are better. Less hospitalisations, less falls, and better functioning. So Mary lives in some rural town in Tasmania or anywhere in Australia. Can you imagine how hard it would be to get this care? There's been a survey of over 300 people with Parkinson's in Australia really recently, and at the time of diagnosis, less than 25% said that they received sufficient support at that time of diagnosis. The medical treatment was really good, but it was medically focused without the referrals to allied health and very little support for mental health. And then there was another study that looked at interviewing the health professionals, the doctors, and they wanted to refer to allied health, but they didn't know who to refer to. If you were a visiting neurologist, you might not know who are the experts in that local area. And Australia has no guidelines for Parkinson's, which again, I think can result in variations in treatment and maybe not entirely to the evidence. So this was very similar to what was happening in the Netherlands in 2004. People with Parkinson's were dissatisfied with care, the treatment was medically focused, it was difficult to find a health professional. And so we've already heard mention of Baz Bloom, who's an internationally renowned neurologist, and he got together with a physiotherapist, Martin Munich, to develop ParkinsonNet. So ParkinsonNet really brings together health professionals into clinical networks. So they know what each other does, they communicate, they get education according to Parkinson's guidelines, and they have ongoing education. They learn what each profession does, and they do it to those guidelines. There's also a web finder portal, so when all the different allied health professionals are trained up, they're easily found in this website. So if you're a person with Parkinson's, you can look on the website and see where the nearest physio is, or if you're a neurologist, you can look and see where the nearest speech pathologist is. In the Netherlands, you're never more than 10 kilometres from one of these trained up ParkinsonNet therapists. There's over 4,000 of them trained up in the Netherlands. And people with Parkinson's also have access to guidelines and information so that they're knowledgeable and that they can be part of the decision making of their care. Does it work? Well, there's been lots of research studies. There is now an increased number of people with Parkinson's in the Netherlands seeing experts. I've already said less complications, less falls, less fractures, less hospitalisations, better function and lower healthcare costs. And the health professionals have increased knowledge but also increased work satisfaction. So can we just bring ParkinsonNet and dump it into Australia? If you look at the size of the Netherlands there, it's tiny, and there's 17, I think, million people who live in the Netherlands. And as I said, you're never more than 10 kilometres from a therapist. Imagine that in rural Australia or even rural Tasmania. So it's not going to be the same here. We need to adapt it. We've also got no guidelines, as I said, and over there they also have incentives for the insurance companies. So if you are a ParkinsonNet therapist, you get remunerated more money, and so there's an incentive to be a ParkinsonNet therapist. So what are we going to do? Well, we want to work with people with Parkinson's, their families and allied health professionals to really work out how we can adapt ParkinsonNet to the Australian context, but particularly the rural and remote context. And so we're going to do that over the first couple of years with surveys and workshops, and then we're going to try and implement it and evaluate it in Tasmania and the western part of Victoria. It's likely that some of it will be through telehealth, but as we know, not everybody has access to good internet connection or can use it. So there's going to need to be lots of different, I guess, innovative ways that we are going to implement it. We've got an amazing team. Some of the people are here today. And you can see in the centre there, we've also got Baz Bloom, who's the neurologist who started ParkinsonNet, to really help us bring this and implement it in Australia, as they've done in many other countries. So back to Mary. If ParkinsonNet is here, then hopefully Mary will have an understanding of the Parkinson's symptoms and how allied health can help. The health professionals will be really easy to find on the ParkinsonNet website. She'll have experts, allied health professionals that she can access either face-to-face or over video call. She remains at work, starts an exercise program and continues to garden. She sees the psychologist and she's able to sleep better, and she has regular 6 monthly or 12 monthly multidisciplinary reviews or follow-up when needed. So I'm just going to finish there, but what we're really looking for at the moment is people with Parkinson's who live in Tasmania to actually come and join us as part of the research team. we want to have people who will be paid, it's about 10 hours per year, to actually join the team and become advisors on the project. So we're looking for people now, and if you are interested, I've got some flyers where you can register your interest. Next year, we'll also be looking for people with Parkinson's, their family members and allied health professionals to fill in some surveys, but also to join the workshops to really try and work out how we're going to adapt ParkinsonNet and bring it to Tasmania so that everybody with Parkinson's can have access to high quality multidisciplinary care. Thank you. So I think we've got time now for some questions. I think Celeste, are you going to run around? So if anyone's got any questions about any of the talks today, we would love to hear from you.
Hello.
Please. Thank you. That's the name.
Tanya, dietitian. It was a great presentation, thank you, and it's so good to see this work being carried out. I'm just wondering whether you have dietitians on your team too, because I didn't hear them mentioned, although diet is really important.
So absolutely. So dietitians are part of the team in the Netherlands. So what they've recommended is that we start the network with training up the, I guess, core speech, OT and physio. But part of that training, there are multidisciplinary days. So those other disciplines will have more in-depth training, but dietitians will be part of the multidisciplinary training. And then as the network grows, then dietitians are definitely part of it. And I know that ParkinsonNet has dietetic guidelines. Yeah, so that will definitely be part of it.
I also didn't see whether dietitians, the Association for Dietitians was one of your partners, although physios were?
No, it was just those 3 core professions for the initial part. Yeah, but absolutely agree. Dietitians are a core and probably again neglected part of the team, or forgotten, I suppose, because we all know that diet has such a huge role.
Diet does have a very big role in Parkinson's, and in fact, it's impacting us all because Parkinson's is not a disease you catch from another person. See, it's about probably 70% of it is environmental. Exposure to toxic chemicals, pesticides, sprays, air, water. Recently, one of the people that I made contact with in Phoenix, Arizona, Brittany Kuznowski, she looked at golf courses, 3,000 golf courses across America, and found that around the golf courses where they're spraying, it's 1.5 to 2 times greater Parkinson's disease. So we have to deal with this long term. We've all got about a teaspoonful of PFAS in our brain already. Everybody in Australia has got that. So we've got to actually deal with this longer term, and it's one of the big issues for the Parliament and politicians and policy makers into the future. So diet, I'd be very interested in talking to you. One of the best persons in the world from my perspective, this doesn't come from UTAS, is Laurie Mishley in California. She's done some brilliant work on diet and Parkinson's. We know that dairy is a big issue for people with Parkinson's, and so there's some areas around that area.
We've also got a couple of dietitians who are part of the MOOC as well, Rochelle Flanagan and remind me,
Fiona.
Yeah.
More questions? Don't be afraid, please.
Hello, my name's Anthea and I work with the older person's mental health team. I'm here with one of our doctors and Huntington's and also our OT on the team. My question is, and I'm a social worker on the team, is for Jane. You mentioned gut biome at the beginning of your speech. Can you expand on that, please?
Biome?
Gut biome and the connection.
That's me, actually. Do you want to talk that one? Yeah, it wasn't me that mentioned that. Was it the microbiome you're talking about, as in the gut? Yeah, it was Harley, that one. So he'll take that.
Yes, it's a really huge area. It's only come out in the last few years, and one of the members of our National Parkinson's Alliance is Dr. Richard Gordon from Queensland University of Technology. He's a specialist in Australia on gut microbiome and Parkinson's. He recently took a talk at the Sunshine Coast Parkinson's Conference. He's got a grant from the US Department of Defence to try and develop some technologies that will assist the US Department of Defence workers, because this grew out of the US Department using Agent Orange and so forth in Vietnam, and also at some of their army camps in America. They found that where there was trichloroethylene in the water, they had up to 2 times greater development of Parkinson's. So there's a lot of work going on. Richard Gordon, if you wanted to see some of his slides, some of his presentations, they're readily available, and we can give you a contact lead for those. But it really is a huge, huge area. He's a real global expert in the area, Dr. Richard Gordon.
I might just add to that, actually, that when we think about Parkinson's, we often think of an older person developing it. And in many ways, that is correct. But, it tends to be people over the age of 60. We obviously know that about 20% of people are younger than that. But what many people don't realise is that Parkinson's actually a middle-age condition. So it's probably been in our brains for about 20 years before we develop the typical signs of slowness and tremor. And that's really important, because if we could detect it much earlier, we have the opportunity to try and stop it. And what are the sorts of signs? Well, they're actually really common signs. So they're things like constipation. Please don't panic and think, oh my gosh, I got constipated, I'm going to get Parkinson's. Not necessarily. It's a very common condition in the population. But when we look at whole populations, we know that those that go on to develop Parkinson's are often developing more constipation in middle age, or things like loss of sense of smell, or acting out your dreams, where people start to kick or punch. This is something called REM sleep behaviour disorder. Sam's done a whole PhD on this. And it's the fact that us medical professions don't recognise that. Because if we could recognise that a bit earlier, we could put people at least through for an earlier diagnosis. And we know that early diagnosis and early, even symptomatic treatment really improves people's quality of life. But the really exciting part of that, and it ties into the microbiome and the gut, there's a feeling that either Parkinson's is getting into our brain through our gut or through our nose before it goes to the brain. And again, that aligns very much with what Harley's talking about, that there's something in the environment, something we're eating or smelling, and that's how it's getting into the brain. So these are areas that are being actively researched around the world, but including here in Tasmania. Triggered questions.
Davina. Davina's on our MOOC.
Thank you, and wonderful presentation. I was wondering if you were going to get dementia, could you prevent it? And who are people who are more likely to get dementia? And yes, is there anything you can do about it?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So dementia is super common. And as we get older, our risk of dementia goes up. So about 10% of people over the age of 65, 70 will be manifesting with dementia. And that's going up to about 30% in people over 85 or 90. So we definitely know age is part of the risk here. And when I went to medical school, we were told it's just bad luck. We don't know who gets it. There's nothing we can do. And dementia has hugely changed in the last 20 years. So we now have really strong evidence that about 45% of dementias can be either stopped, prevented, or slowed down. So we push back the onset of dementia into much later life. So it's not affecting such a big part of people's lives. And if you're interested in this, we do have a Preventing Dementia MOOC. Just Google it, Preventing Dementia MOOC. It comes up, it's a free course. Again, really understandable, really easy to follow. There is another MOOC called Understanding Dementia. And these are not scary courses. I really believe this is a story of hope because it allows us to try and do something to reduce our risk. Ultimately, some people will develop dementia even if they live the best life, you know, so there is a part of it that we cannot modify. But I think the fact that we can modify about half of our risk is a real story of hope. And I would encourage everyone to have a look at this Understanding Dementia MOOC. You can do it on your mobile or tablet or laptop. Whenever you want to do it, you can just dip in and out of it. But it's really informative. Does that help?
Can I just mention one thing? One of the things that I've become aware of is people like Michael Fox. How many years did he hide it? 7 years. Billy Connolly, number of years before he came out. I didn't want to come out and I told my family, but for 6 months, I didn't want to tell anybody because there's a lot of shame, stigma and stereotype around Parkinson's and a lot of loneliness. And so because about 50% of people go silent when they develop Parkinson's. But a lot of people have said, 90% of people with Parkinson's have said if they could find something that would help them over the course, they'd like to actually take it on board. So I think that's what we've got to do longer term to actually make sure that we overcome those stigma and stereotypes that exist. And that we'll do it when we get a better biomarker and we have better programs and so forth that bring it out into the open. One of the things I'd like to see done, the lady who did the painting of me, she's done about 25 beautiful big paintings. I'd like to do a display somewhere of these and bring it out to the community so that we can show them what it's like to have Parkinson's.
My name's Andrew. Just wondering, you were mentioning about looking for people with Parkinson's to be involved now. Are you happy to take them internationally at all, or do they have to be locally in Tasmania? My wife's brother is in New York, but he's an Australian, and he has early onset Parkinson's, advanced. And he's actually had deep brain stimulation surgery as well. But I think he would be quite interested to be involved with that because he's been a bit similar. Probably for 3 to 4 years, we knew something was going on, but he hid everything. He didn't want to talk about it. And as a result of his surgery, he's actually came to Australia, came to his family, and really was trying to promote Parkinson's as something that to be dealt with. So I just thought maybe we can forward this information on to him as well, and he might be involved.
So for the ParkinsonNet project, we're particularly looking for people in Tasmania because I guess we want to learn about the actual local context. But we are looking more broadly, I suppose, for people that are interested in joining the Tasmanian Parkinson Project. We often have guest speakers, including people with Parkinson's. We also have the MOOC, so there might be other ways that if he wanted to, get involved. So we'd love, we can give you our details and for him to contact us.
Oh, question. Okay. Sure.
Clyde.
There's a lot of medical grants and research. Is there the grants to be incorporated into the ag industries to help facilitate the reduction of the use of these chemicals, pesticides, and things like that? So links to medical side of research.
Thanks, Clyde. One of the people who's become recently very focused on this is a professor by David Blacker, who was in Western Australia. He recently wrote a book, and Michelle's done quite a bit of work with him. And I've recently met him in Canberra at the April conference this year. And he's really interested in upping the ante in relation to this. And because there's a number of people around Australia, there's quite a lot of clusters of Parkinson's. Farming groups along the northwest coast in Tasmania, in Victoria, in certain areas where they did a lot of planting of particular crops and so forth. And so what we've got to do is we've got to get focus on what's actually happening in people being exposed, particularly to some of the toxic chemicals. And there's some very good research that comes out of Central California by the work that they've done there, because they've got real clusters in Central California as well. And I suggested to David yesterday, and corresponded with him again today, that we might get a group together, an SIG group in Australia, to actually look at this. There's a number of people. There's one who deals with reproductive medicine, Mark Green at University of Melbourne. He's a specialist in reproductive medicine, and he shows the toxicities of various chemicals in terms of reproduction. And then there's David Lowe. He runs the Australian Pesticide Reduction Network. There's a man by the name of Josh Davis who formed a group recently known as the Pesticide Group, and I've got contact with him as well. If you're interested in any of that, Clyde, we could certainly give you some details, and certainly this is the area that we've got to go to in the future. In 10 years' time, one of the growing things in the world is brain health. People are going to become talking about brain health for the next 2 decades. We realise that the brain is very, very much a part of our being, and it's been neglected. And so there's a whole burgeoning area of brain health expansion. I can give you access to some videos and clips on those things if any of you are interested, and you can make contact with us. Well, thank you very, very much.
No, thank you so much for coming out tonight and listening. We will be sticking around for another, 10 or 15 minutes if you want to come and have a chat. I think there's still leftover food, so help yourself. And yeah, thank you so much for coming.